Now, with all the things that we do to destroy our health by using calcium disruptors in our body, I will only mention one thing about calcium in the bone, and then I'll go on, because most of this is about calcium in the blood. Here is an interesting little study which most of you probably did not read in the 1989 Pediatric Dentistry Journal, entitled "The Effect of Calcium Lactate in Erosion and S. mutans in Rats When Added to Coca-Cola." And here's what it says. What they basically did in this study was they gave 3 groups of rats. One group had Coca-Cola. That was all they had to drink. The other group had Coca-Cola, to which calcium lactate was added. And the third group just got distilled water. And they wanted to see over a period of time what was the erosion of the enamel and the dentine and the teeth in the 3 groups. The group that just got Coca-Cola, the group that got Coca-Cola with calcium lactate, and the group that got distilled water. Right? The 3 experimental groups, either Coke, Coke with calcium, or distilled water. In conclusion, calcium lactate added to Coca-Cola significantly reduced tooth erosion in rats. There was no significant difference in the erosion between the Coca-Cola calcium lactate group and the distilled water groups. See that? There was no significant difference between the erosion between the Coca-Cola and calcium lactate group and the distilled water groups, which is actually pretty amazing. Why doesn't Coca-Cola fortify with calcium lactate? Yeah, that's not a question for me, but I thought if you wanted to see whether or not calcium lactate had a protective factor to the bone and teeth, well, here is an example that it does.
In this review of the literature in 23, it was quite evident from the work of Dr. Percy Howe in Boston and others. He was a dentist and who made a complete survey of the Boston school children and wrote a report on their dental health. Dr. Howe found that the youngsters who had good teeth were the same youngsters who did not have a history of children's disease. The youngsters who had the bad teeth also had a history of measles and mumps and scarlet fever and constant colds and so forth. So that he demonstrated way back in 1923 that dental disease was merely a part of the syndrome of general sickness and lowered resistance.
The important thing to remember about the standard process calcium lactate is that one of the best ways to cause hypocalcemia is to be deficient in magnesium or to have too much magnesium. There are many companies that add magnesium to a calcium formula. Often they do it in a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts calcium to 1 magnesium. Way too high. That will result in hypocalcemia. Too little magnesium, hypocalcemia. The principles of biochemistry by Whitehandler, Smith, and Stenton established a long time ago that the proper ratio for non-cellular calcium and magnesium as blood constituents was 5-to-1. That is a direct quote from that book. And the famous textbook of physiology by Zothout and Tuttle, 9th edition, during fevers, infections, acute inflammation, etc., in order for the white blood cells to function effectively, ionized calcium must be abundantly available. When blood ionized calcium falls below 50% of normal, febrile seizures are experienced. So you see, it's right in the textbooks. And there's not a medical doctor in your town who will take a look or even care slightly about the blood calcium level of a sick child, or a sick adult for that matter. And yet you can see it is one of the most fundamental, important, and simple to correct problems that doctors face every day. Because most of what we do in our dietary patterns deprive us of ionized or ionizable calcium. All the glucose and sugar that inhibit calcium uptake. Calcium lactate is the most inexpensive and maybe the most important little pill that Standard Process makes. And I'm sorry, I'm not taking questions now. Hold on to them. Let's get a little deeper into this whole thing with Dr. Lee, because the other great part of this importance in fighting infections, what good does it do to get the cops to respond? In other words, the phagocytes to respond. If you call up the police and say, I've got armed robbers attacking my house, breaking into my house, and here come the police, right on time, heroically, and they forgot their bullets. And their guns, when they pull the trigger, have a little flag that comes out and says, bang. You want cops with guns, and you want bullets in those guns. And you want those cops to know how to use those guns and bullets. So, the calcium wave is how you call the cops. How those phagocytes get strong and healthy is the effect of vitamin C complex. And I want you to hear Dr. Lee explain it. So you might want to watch the volume there if we have to adjust it again. Thanks, Walt.
What is vitamin C? Vitamin C is a complex. Every vitamin is a complex. There are no simple single vitamins, to my knowledge. That's been a misapprehension created by the chemist in his ignorance. Any more than a hunk of brass is a watch. A watch is a complex structure. It's a unit as a watch, but it's not a unit as a chemical. So that our vitamin C complex today we know comprises number one, ascorbic acid, which is an antioxidant. The most bulky part of the complex, but not the most important. The anti-hemorrhagic factor, also known as vitamin P, which is also found in lemon and orange peel, but in far more potent quantities and type in buckwheat, in the green buckwheat juice. That prevents capillary damage, it prevents protein degeneration, it prevents harm from X-rays. If you wanted to treat a patient with X-ray for cancer, it'd be a very good idea to load that patient up very liberally with vitamin P or natural C complex first. And the normal tissues of the patient would be fortified possibly as much as 10 to 1 against excess doses of X-ray. But the most important factor of all in that C complex is an enzyme known as tyrosinase, Tyrosinase, which metabolizes the activity of the amino acid tyrosine, which is a hormone precursor and is vitally important in the fabrication of all of the adrenal hormones. That's why you'll find a lot of vitamin C complex in the adrenal. The natural source of this in foods is potato juice, number one, and mushrooms, number two. But you must have raw mushroom to get it. Raw mushroom is quite tasty, by the way, when it's liquefied with other things in a milkshake. Potato juice is not bad if you extract it with a little lemon juice to stop it from oxidizing so it doesn't turn dark. A little potato juice is a very potent thing in controlling fevers in children, if you don't happen to have some natural C concentrate available, because a fever is an indication of the need for vitamin C. When we have an invasion of microorganisms and the phagocytes fail to properly cope with it, nature raises the temperature to stimulate the phagocyte. The phagocytes wouldn't need any stimulation if it weren't for C deficiency. So that the best thing to bring down the temperature, wherever there's a temperature, is a little natural vitamin C. Now, there's another reason for temperatures, which must be kept in mind at the same time. In children who are deficient in calcium, in which the bones are being formed and maybe robbing the body fluids of almost all of the calcium, you can have some spontaneous high temperatures in which if you were to run a daily chart of the youngster's temperature, you'd find that it would be wavy. It wouldn't stay down where it belonged. And at times it might even get into a critical condition. Many a youngster has been put into the hospital for observation with the effort to find a bad appendix or something or other that would cause these temperature rises, when it's nothing more than calcium deficiency. Now, that never occurs where the youngster gets hard water to drink. Normally, we get our calcium in the form of bicarbonate, which is the kind that is required to stimulate phagocytic action from hard water. We cannot get any calcium in that bicarbonate form out of bone meal or bone extracts or dicalcium phosphate, because dicalcium phosphate will not break down to yield carbonate. It's too tight a chemical union. Carbonates will go into phosphates in the presence of phosphorus or other phosphates, but they won't go back again. So wherever you have temperatures, you must consider vitamin C and calcium in its bicarbonate or lactate or malate or vegetable acid combination. These vegetable acids, like the lactate and malate, we find calcium malate in apples and maple syrup. The vegetable acid is burned off and releases calcium to form calcium bicarbonate in the blood. So vitamin C and calcium bicarbonate are the partners which protect us from all influences of infection, virus or bacterial, that we have to fight.